Each speaker will present for about 25 to 30 minutes, and then we'll do a Q&A session at the end for both. So we'll go ahead and get started. We're going to start with Kayley Rapp, who is one of the archivists at the Breman in Atlanta, Georgia. She graduated from Berry College with a Bachelor of Arts in English in 2019. She later earned a master's degree in Library and Information Science from the University of Alabama in 2021. Her main archival interests are antique books, family history, and textiles. Second, we have Emily Corbin, who serves as the reference archivist for the special collections at Pitt's Theology Library. Within this position, Emily supports the needs of patrons using the manuscript and rare books materials within the Special Collections Department. She hopes to encourage researchers by helping individuals ask the right questions in their research and gain access to historical documents. She especially enjoys working with first-time users of the archives. Emily joined Emory Libraries in 2017 and Pitt's Theology Library in 2022. Before working at Emory, Emily served as a reference librarian within the public library system and as the archivist at Columbia Theological Seminary. Please, everyone, help me in welcoming Kayley Rapp and Emily Corbin to Georgia Archives.
Really excited to be here. As Robin said, I am one of the archivists at the Breman, which is a Jewish museum in Midtown, specifically that. So the Breman is one of the largest Jewish repositories of Jewish history in the South, and our mission is to connect people to Jewish history, culture, and art. Our primary focuses are on Holocaust education and Southern Jewish history, specifically in Georgia and Alabama. And our archives, which are named after the Cuba family, houses over 400 manuscript collections, 18,000 photographs, 2,000 artifacts, and hundreds of oral histories. It was now, the Breman was named for one of our original founders, William Breman, who was a local businessman, philanthropist, and one of the founders of the museum. There's a lot of other stuff in Atlanta named after him, including the Breman Jewish Home, which is for people in like the later years of their life, and it was opened in 1996. So common Jewish religious records are going to look a little different than what you might be used to if you are Christian. They have rabbi sermons and notes, high holiday services infos, which the high holidays are going to be Shana, which is Jewish New Year, Yom Kippur, which is actually today, which is the Day of Atonement, Sukkot, which is a harvest festival commemorating the 40 years that they were in the desert, and Simchat Torah, which celebrates the completion of the annual Torah cycle. So they finish the whole book and then you get to start again. Stuff like that, monthly and weekly bulletins, membership information, Sunday and Hebrew school enrollment, bar and bat mitzvahs, confirmations, which you only find in Reform Judaism, conversion records, marriage certificates, and death and burial records. So stuff like that is what you're going to normally find in the collections having to do with temples or synagogues. So how do we accession these records? I feel like this is something I get asked a lot because people just hand us over mountains of papers and it's like, okay, well, what happens after that? So initially what happens is that somebody contacts us. It's usually family members, the synagogues themselves, religious or civic organizations, things like that. And they will come to us or we will go to them depending on the situation. And we'll discuss their materials, the provenance, which is basically the history of those objects and how they came to be owned by who they're owned by, the historical significance, the local context, stuff like that. And depending on what we learn from these people, you will either get a deed of gift, which is them signing it over to us, or they'll get a temporary receipt of deposit, which is we're going to look further into this and see whether or not we want to keep it or if we're going to hand it back to you. From there, we do an assessment, which is where we assess the materials donated to see if they fit in with our collections. Every single archive is going to have a scope that they have for themselves. Some things are going to fit that, some things are not. Obviously, I'm not going to take the records from the church down the street that has nothing to do with the Holocaust or Southern Jewish history. But maybe the bar mitzvah records of a very prominent Jewish businessman in the area I might be interested in. So as we go through the materials, we're going to parse out anything we automatically can't keep. Every archive has certain rules or limitations. Us, for example, we can't keep anything made of fur because it's a hazard to the other textiles. There could be vermin in them, things like that. And then I like to create an inventory of everything that is there, just so that way I know what I'm looking at and what I'm expecting when I go further back in. Sometimes it's really detailed. Sometimes it's sort of just like subject headings. It really depends on how big things are and how in depth I want to be. And then we'll start to process the collection. This is a really research intensive stage because I'm trying to get the most information I can about the materials that have been given to me, so that way I have more context. And so that when I go to hand this over to researchers, I can tell them what they're being given. When we get to this stage, this is where you sort of have to decide if you want to keep the original order, which would be the order and organization of the stuff that was given to you, or if you want to make new categories and start afresh. Which one is better kind of just depends on the situation. Sometimes we get given really well organized things that I can just keep under the subject headings they came in under. Other times it's a box that's been in somebody's attic for 30 years that there was never any organization to begin with. So I have to sort that out myself. At this point, you have to decide what to keep, what to toss or return, depending on what the donor wanted. And then you start prepping the materials for arrangement, which is how they end up with researchers like you guys. So they will be arranged in accordance with best practices, which is going to vary depending on the collection. How I store photographs is going to be different from documents or other artifacts. Then I will create finding aids, which is how you guys get to find these things, or catalog entries, and then everything is ready for you guys to be able to see them. So one of the things that I think is really interesting in terms of religious records are family Bibles. We have a couple of them at the Breman. I really think that they are one of the original forms of family record keeping. The practice was popularized in the 18th century. No one really knows how this practice got started, but there's a theory that it comes from the invention of the printing press and increasing literacy rates, leading to more people have Bibles and other books in their homes. Families usually recorded births, marriages, deaths, things like that. And I have an example of two of them on the next slide. This is currently on display in the museum. This is the Minnis Family Bible. They are from Savannah. They've been there for a long time. They still have family there today. And this Bible goes from 1771 to 1865. As you can see on the right there, it's written in Hebrew. The first entry on the top says Sunday evening of the 21st of November, 1784. My daughter Esther was born Kislev 5549, which is the 9th month of the year 5549, which is the year in the traditional Jewish lunar calendar. Underneath that, it says on Friday, March 6, 1789, contemporary with 8 Ador 5549, departed this life, Philip Minnis. And then the last entry that I am able to read, the one on the right there, is very smudgy. Says on 20th May 1786, or 24 Lyar 5549, was born the daughter of Philip and Judith Minnis, who was named Philippa. So right there, you just have a bunch of information about this family. I think there's probably more throughout the Bible, but that is just how it is currently on display in the museum. It's very fragile, so it's hard to flip through it at this time. This is another fancier Bible that we have. This displays 2 pages about birth. This is from the Sheffel family Bible. I believe they're from Atlanta. This Bible spans from 1749 to 1925. So I can't even imagine how many generations that is. A couple of entries that I was able to read from there. One says Isaiah Nathan, son of David and Sarah Nathan, born on Tuesday morning, 6 a.m., March 1st, 1831. Another says Philip Samuel Nathan, son of Isaiah and Georgia Nathan, born on Wednesday evening, 15 minutes before 11 o'clock, May 12th, 1852. And then the last one I was able to sort of transcribe says Georgia Nathan's daughter of Thomas J. and Irene E. Sheftel, born Monday, 6:16 p.m., February 1st, 1886. This is really one of the original ways I think people were able to keep track of family things before there were like formal censuses in some situations. I know for a lot of people, when they go through their family history, a lot of stuff they see are from older Bibles or church records. And this was sort of what there was before. We could just go on Ancestry and look at like the 1940 census. So I'm going to talk about a couple. Sorry?
I have a question about that last one.
Yeah.
That particular book,
Mhm.
you just transcribe and copy all that and then return it to the owners, or you?
It's currently on display in the museum. They donated it. Yes. When I said transcribed, I just meant what of the cursive I was able to read. So I'm going to talk about a couple of the major temple and synagogue records that we have at the Breman. This is really going to be the main ways you can find religious records at the Breman. We have a very good relationship with most of the synagogues around the state, where they have given us a lot of their records from their memberships over the years, the main one being the temple, which is in Atlanta. Some of you guys might recognize it from driving Miss Daisy. That's where Miss Daisy goes to services. It was originally founded as the Hebrew Benevolent Congregation in 1867, and it is one of our largest collections. That spans from 1853 to 2018. They are still giving us stuff, so that will probably expand over time. And it contains records related to major life events such as marriages, bar bat mitzvahs, confirmations, things like that, as well as correspondence and various papers from some of the famous rabbis they've had, such as Rabbi David Marks and Rabbi Jacob Rothschild. Rabbi Rothschild was very big in the civil rights movement at the time. He actually was very good friends with Martin Luther King Jr. And he was the rabbi during the temple bombing in the 1950s. But I do think Emory has his papers. We didn't exist yet, so it went to Emory. And then also, if anybody is familiar with the Leo Frank case that was made famous, especially from Parade, we have Leo Frank's diary in there. Correspondence. That's a picture of the temple currently. They're actually down the street from where I work. Another very large temple that works with us is Congregation Orvi Shalom. They are also in Atlanta. They are a Sephardic synagogue founded in 1914, and our records of them span from 1913 to 2009. Now, Sephardic just means that they are a group of Jewish people who were based in the Mediterranean. Mostly we hear about Ashkenazi Jews, which are the Eastern European Jews, which is what most people are familiar with just because it's a larger group of people. There's a lot of words, it can be confusing. But they have bar and bat mitzvah records, Hebrew school membership lists, congregation histories. We of course have the rabbi papers, and then information on Sephardic Jewish traditions and origins. So that's going to be very different as opposed to the temple, who were created by German Jews when they came to the city. Temple Sinai collection is definitely one of our newer temples. They were founded in 1968. They are one of the fastest growing Reformed temples in the metro Atlanta area, and our records for them are from 1968 to 2017. They have confirmation records, membership information, and then temple bulletins from their founding to now. It has a lot of really good information on what it looks like to create and found a new congregation in more modern times, as opposed to the 1800s when most of these would have been formed initially. Now down in Savannah, we have one of the oldest ones down there, Congregation B'nai B'rith Jacob. That is an Orthodox synagogue established in 1861 by Eastern European Jews. Records we have for them are from 1879 to 2013. What's interesting about their records is that a lot of them aren't just written in English, they're written in Hebrew and Yiddish, which, if you're not familiar, Yiddish is sort of a combination of Hebrew and German that was developed over time. And like most of the others, they have their bulletins, records on their Hebrew school, membership information, things like that. Up in Rome, where I went to school, we had Rodam Shalom congregation, which is a much smaller congregation than the rest of them. It was founded in 1875, and we have records from 1875 to 2005. This is going to be a much smaller collection just based on the fact that it's a smaller congregation and it's not really in use anymore. They have services maybe once a month or for the high holidays, but it's not active like the ones in the rest of the country. Now, when looking through congregation records, you're going to be able to use the things like the newsletters, the membership records to see where family members went, what temples and synagogues family members attended, and what the culture of their life were probably like, their contemporaries, and maybe see the types of life events you won't see on a census. Finding out when or who performed a bat mitzvah for somebody can be really important, because that's when they became a man, became an adult member of their congregation. Or if you didn't know that somebody was converted to Judaism, that would also be a big deal to find out. Another thing that I think is important to look into are specifically rabbis' papers. We have a lot of papers from rabbis that are not specifically connected to a synagogue, and I think it can give a more personal look at a congregation and its communities. There we have a picture of Rabbi David Marks, who was one of the original rabbis of the temple. Their papers are commonly going to include speeches, sermons, correspondence, and personal records about the rabbis themselves and their community involvement. Some interesting papers we have from different rabbis are Rabbi Philip France, who served the Temple Sinai for 25 years. Rabbi Markuson, who was a spiritual leader in Macon for over 58 years. We have Rabbi Harry Epstein, who was a spiritual leader, Congregation AA, and a community leader in Atlanta over 50 years. He and his wife were also Holocaust survivors. They came here after that. And then Rabbi Tobias Gaffin, who was a very well-known 20th century spiritual leader, and also best known for making Coca-Cola kosher. So whenever you see that thing on Coca-Cola that says kosher for Passover, that's his doing. He got them set. Yeah, so as somebody who did not grow up Jewish, I grew up Catholic, it is a very different look into the type of records you're going to see in a synagogue or temple versus a church. At a church, you're going to have baptisms. You're going to have, depending on what denomination you have, confirmations, first communions, things like that. But there are, compared to a bat mitzvah or a bris, which is a circumcision ceremony, but there are going to be a lot of overlaps, like marriages and burials and deaths, but they're just going to look a little bit different because of different traditions. But I think that either way is going to show a lot of how people ancestors lived and what their contemporaries were like and what the world looked like when they were alive. And if you would like to see more, I have put a QR code that will take you to the research page of the Breman, which will give you access to our finding aids, our photograph collection, and our oral histories. Our oral histories are pretty cool. We have some going back to the 80s of really prominent members of Jewish Atlanta and just Jewish Georgia in general. Got some really cool people. We interviewed Alfred Urey last year, who is the writer of Driving Miss Daisy. That was really cool. And yeah, that's about it. That's the Breman, and that's our archives.
Thank you, Kayley. Let me go ahead and get our next presenter set up. So you just scroll down.
Oh, scroll.
Yeah. All right,
Yeah.
usually, that's all right. We got. Everyone, please welcome Emily Corbin.
All right. Good afternoon. Thank you. Yes, applause. So I'm Emily and I work at the Theology Library, which is one of the libraries at Emory. We're associated with Candler School of Theology. So whereas the former archives was Jewish history, this is Methodist, and pretty much predominantly Methodist. All right, so this is our department. It's pretty small. This is our head of special collections, Brandon. That's me. And then Ann McShane is our digital asset librarian. So anything digital or any scanning that's done, Ann supervises. All right, what do we have? This is a general overview of just the special collections. So we have over 160,000 volumes of rare or special books, 4,000 cubic feet of archival and manuscript material, and we're also the repository. So the repository is when there is an agreement, usually legal, that these organizations provide their records to us. So it's kind of an active collecting. We still get stuff from these people every year, and we expect to moving forward. But obviously, the Candler School of Theology, the North Georgia Conference of the UMC, Society of Biblical Literature, American Academy of Religion, and the Association for Clinical Pastoral Education. That one is done. There's no more records going on there, so we just have what's already been there. All right. So these are the main things that I think would be interesting for people who are looking for genealogical records. Obviously, like I said, we have a ton of rare books, and that is very interesting, but it is not necessarily relevant to the genealogical research, because things like family Bibles and pulpit Bibles and stuff like that might have names in them, those are not rare books. Those are not old enough to be considered rare books. So we might have stuff like that, but it wouldn't be part of the rare book collection. So our manuscript materials, which are the personal or business papers, talking about how we create a finding aid, which Kayley already talked about. And then the church histories are what I think would be the most relevant and have the most information moving forward. And that's kind of what I focus on. All right, so what's in a church record? And when I say church record, I mean, we have one big collection that has a lot of really tiny church collections, so like a folder for each church. But a lot of times churches provide enough information that we can create a whole archival record just for a specific church. But it depends on what the church provides. So there's nothing where they're required to give us specific information. It's what they decide to give to us. So this is aspirational. We would love if all of this stuff is in a church record, but a lot of times you just have to pull the record and find out. But there are baptismal, marriage, and burial registers, historic rolls, official minutes and correspondence of the church and the meetings, the board and committee manuals. Well, that is not as interesting. Official minutes, correspondence. And then we do have actually a lot of women's groups and men's groups and Sunday schools and mission groups. And that's the kind of thing where it's not obvious that it might have somebody's name in it, but if you pull it and you look through it, they might list who was there that Sunday. They might list who's a member of these women's missions groups. There's a lot of really strong presence of women's missionary society where they would form groups and do fundraisers and all that kind of stuff. And a lot of that was very prominent during World War II. All right, so a little more correspondence files, church bulletins, church newsletters, annual reports, and financial records, and then photographs if we're lucky. And if we're even luckier, they're identified. Sometimes we just get like a chili cook-off. We don't know when this was or who it is or anything like that. Oh, I wanted to point out, let me go back. This is our reading room. You can see the picture. We're lucky to have a really nice and beautiful reading room, but that's where you come to do your research if you come to PETS. All right. Okay, why is this information useful? And I'm assuming since you all are interested in genealogical research, you already know this, but I'm just going to put it out there. So congregational histories can reveal things about one's ancestors' religious community, the christenings, marriages, burials, deaths, all of that can have names and dates, which can be integral in researching your family line. Sometimes if a family was involved in, excuse me, the founding of the church, that can be even more helpful. There's biographical details. Sometimes they'll list people's maiden names, their married names, who their children were, what area they lived in, if they moved, why they moved, all of that. And then the church histories, centennial books, and meeting minutes can contain the names of congregational members and hopefully more baptisms, marriages, and deaths. That's where you get the meat of the research is in those records. And honestly, it really just depends on who was keeping records at the time. Sometimes we have really good record books and we're like, wow, that person was very fastidious. And sometimes you don't get anything and there's nothing you can do. And a lot of times there's always a fire. So there's always something that's missing and you're like, why is it missing? Probably a fire. We don't know that. All right, so if you're looking for somebody specific, what do you need to provide to somebody like me? So you're going to call the archives. You say, I want to find this person's in your archives. I think they went to this church. And if you call and ask me that, I'm going to try to help you, but I need as much information as possible. So number one, bare minimum, I need the name of the church because we have too many records to look through every church, obviously. I need dates, any dates. Any dates like when they were born, when they died, when they got married, when their mother was born, when their father died, when they moved to Atlanta, where they lived, that kind of thing. And then personal identification, once again, as much as possible. Names, including maiden names, because sometimes that can confuse things. If you're just looking for like baptismal records, they might be going by their maiden name and then they get married, their name changes. Date of birth, date of death, date of transfer, marriage, spouse's name, anything with the spouse's family. And one thing to note, our reference staff, me, can spend about 30 minutes on each inquiry. So we get a lot of requests and we are very happy to have requests. But if you want someone to do research for you, we can only spend about 30 minutes on something. So if you require more research, we have other options. But one of those options is if you can't come in or you don't want to pay for scans, you can ask about a freelance researcher. We do have people we suggest. So you'd have to pay them to do that research. All right, so here's a few pictures of things that I just pulled from the archives when I was making this. These are a few cradle roll certificates. I find them very visually appealing. They're very sweet, but it lists some of the names for the basically like the baby Sunday school. And then it lists, you can see how these names would be relevant if you're doing research, and then it has some dates. We've had people call in. I think the most recent one was someone was trying to renew their passport and they needed vital information, and we were able to pull it from like their birth certificate, or not their birth certificate, their birth record in the Methodist Church. So, I mean, it's relevant even today. This was like somebody born in 1980, so it wasn't even that long ago. All right, here's a few ledgers and then a membership roll, just a few ideas of what it looks like when you're looking through the archives. Can you see my little mouse moving? Oh, you can't. Okay. So you see the name here in the column, and then how received baptism. All right, so they're looking for your certificate, vows. I guess they vowed they had been baptized at one point. This is a date, the preacher, and then removal. So if they left, why? I like when they just put die. Like, okay, we get it. Anyway, membership roll and loose leaf. This is some more. As you can see, it had been in some kind of binder. We took it out. This is from 1967. So a little more recent. All right, this one's a little bit older. We have register of infant baptisms and then just register of, which is, these are members, I believe. So if you look over here, I like this one because it says 08. You're like, oh, 2008. But no, it's 1908 and 1909. Here's a few over here that are from 1902 and 1904. But it's listing the names and then the parents' names, which is even better because then you get another generation. And then maybe you could find the baptism of a parent and you find their parent, and then you get to go back as far as possible. You get the pastor. All right, we have a lot of these. So these are all different ones, but this is what I think is most relevant if you're doing genealogical research. And they all look a little bit different. All right, more membership roles. Then there's a lot of deceased people, so at least they let you know. All right, so how do you get to materials at Pitt's Theology Library? We have two systems, kind of. One is called Library Search. That's just our library catalog. So if you go to Emory's library website, you find the Library Search. And some of our archival materials are in Library Search. We also have a finding aid database called Archivist. That holds all of our archival materials, none of our books. So if you're just looking for archival materials, go to Archivist. But you can look for both, hopefully, in Library Search. And I'll go into details a little bit in just a minute. But so the reading room where you can look at stuff, let me pause and go back. All of our materials are kept in a locked climate controlled bowl. So, and some of them are stored off-site. So if you want to view stuff, you have to request it. You can't just come in and look at stuff or pull things off the shelf. As much as we would love for you to, we trust you, you're all adults, but that's just how it goes when you're at the archives. So the reading room is open from 10 to 4, Monday through Friday by appointment only. All appointments have to be made 48 hours in advance. And we say that because sometimes it takes 48 hours to request stuff from off-site and get the courier to deliver it. If you just show up, we will try to help you, but I can't guarantee that that will happen. And I want everybody to get what they want. So please request stuff at least 48 hours in advance. All right, so this is Library Search. If you go to Emory Libraries, you can see the library catalog on your left, and then say you search the library catalog for a church. You click on that church, and then it'll pull up this record. So this is for Briarcliff United Methodist Church, Atlanta, Georgia. You can see some of those boxes are kept at what's called our Library Service Center, which is our offsite storage facility. And then some of them are kept at Pitt's Theology Library Special Collections. You can click on the blue Locate Request item, and that's how you request things through our library catalog. All right, so this is the archive space. This is where all of the archival material is kept and where you can find finding aids. So another word for finding aids is a resource record. I don't know why they wish to call them two different things, just to confuse people, but this can be helpful when you're doing your research. Say you want to come in and you live an hour away. You want to make sure you're pulling something that's relevant. So if you find a church in our archive space, this is Asbury, UMC. On the right, you can see collection organization. So this blue thing here, this gives you an inventory basically of what's in the collection. So that could be relevant to you. Hopefully it includes dates. So this is register of church membership. That seems like that would be relevant if you're doing genealogical research. Membership roll and loose leaf, also relevant. Register church records, yes. Membership roll, yes. Financial records, probably not, unless if somebody was the treasurer. Membership records, yes. Minutes, treasurer's report, probably not. Guest book, I'd pull that. Membership paperwork, yes. Local church report, no. And then it just keeps going down. But also you get a little bit on the left of what's called scope and content note, a little bit of history. If there's any restrictions, if there's anything that's not in English, the dates, biographical note. When we have a church, the biographical note is for the church. So it's the biography of the church, basically the historical note. If there's any issues with reproduction with church histories, there's usually not. All right, so this is one collection I wanted to note. We do have one large group of church histories that have already been digitized. So in our system, they're referred to as MSS 028. They're a local church history collection. For some reason, I have asked about this, I don't know why. This is not available to the public, but if you contact me and ask for this, we just send you the scan. It's not a problem. As you can see on the right, we have them all listed alphabetically. So if you click on the little drop down, this is not live, so I can't do that, but it gives you all the churches that start with A, obviously B, move on down the alphabet. But all of these have been digitized already. And if we have stuff that's digitized, we provide it free of charge. If we have to scan it, I'll talk about that later. But if it's already been scanned, we're happy to provide it for free. All right, so here's an example of one of those local church histories. It's not as helpful for genealogical research because it doesn't list very many names except for like the pastor and the associate pastor or the founder of the church. But if you're looking for the history of the church, if you want a little bit more understanding, it's good for that. So this is the history of Fayetteville Methodist Church South. A lot of times the names change through history. So I doubt it kept that name, but this was from November 1937 at the founding, and it provides, or it was written in 37, it's about the founding. So it provides the history. So that's basically what you're looking at with all of those local church histories. And I would say we have a couple hundred in that collection. All right, so say you've looked and you found a finding aid. You see there's minutes. You live in California, you don't want to come and look at this stuff yourself, and you also want to be the one to look through the materials. You don't want to pay for a researcher, you want to do it yourself. We can and do provide scans often. Like I said, if it's been previously scanned, it's always worth asking. We provide it free of charge. If we have to do new scans, it's 50 cents a page for PDF or JPEG copies. We can also do higher resolution scans if it's a picture you want or something like that, but that is a separate conversation because it's just a little bit of a different scan. Once again, we have local researchers, and this is a situation, well, really all situations, you're gonna have to talk to somebody to get to materials. We don't have much you can get to without that, and that person's gonna be me. So happy to talk to you. All right, so say you wanna come in physically and visit the special collections. I wish this was an easier system. It is not. It is complicated. You're not going to be able to figure it out yourself. That's not a challenge. You won't be able to do it. I promise. It's very complicated. So first, you have to create a special collections request account if you're a new user. If some of you have been before, you might have an account already, but if you have not come in the past year and a half when the system was implemented, you don't have an account. You have to create one. So that's the link. I have provided all of these. If you want to come in, I think you should just email me and I will provide the links directly to it. I do it all the time. I'm happy to. We also have a YouTube video that I got one of my colleagues to make that gives you step-by-step instructions on how to create that account. So once you've created your account, you have to find the item in library search or archive space and then click on request item. And then it will give you the prompts to go through and request it. To finish the request, you have to actively create an appointment. So once again, that appointment has to be 48 hours in advance. If you try to create it within that 48 hours, the system will lock you out. And then you have to pick a time and the place, which is always going to be the reading room at Pitt's Theology Library. You cannot view so we have other archives on campus. You can't view stuff from other archives in our reading room. You have to go to each place. Once again, please call or email me. The system can be very confusing. I do a lot of stuff on the back end to try to make it as easy as possible. All right, so we do have a few things. Oh, sorry. Let me go back.
Copy that email.
Yeah.
YouTube.
I'm sorry, what?
I just wanted to copy that YouTube.
Oh, please do. Yes, I will leave it there for a second. And I have my contact information at the end. I also have business cards if anyone wants that, if that's more helpful. Or you can contact my supervisor, Brandon, if you want, but he will forward you to me. So whatever you want to do. You good? Okay.
Wait.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Just passed out.
I know, I should have printed out little little URLs. Good to go? Okay. All right, so in the main library, so the special collections is located on the 4th floor of this Candler Library. On the 2nd floor is our main reference area. We do have a few things in our reference area. You don't have to make an appointment to view. You just come into the library, you look at it as long as the library is open. We do have the United Methodist Church journals. That can be interesting if one of your ancestors was maybe a minister or spoke at a conference or something like that. Oh, yeah.
Confusing people that know about Emory. What do you mean by the main library?
So I'm part of Candler School of Theology.
Also the name of the original library, Emory.
Okay, you're right. It is.
All this is happening in the theology building.
I am in the theology building. This stuff is all in the theology building.
That needs to be made clear because Emory's got.
Sure. No, and I appreciate that. The main library on campus as of today is the Woodruff Library. That's also confusing because there's a health science library called the Woodruff Library. So it seems like maybe these two families had a lot of money. I don't know. But yes, all of this, everything that I have said is in the theology library. The theology school is referred to as the Candler School of Theology. So you have to go into the Candler School of Theology. Within the Candler School of Theology is the Pitts Theology Library. So we're not a separate building. We're inside the Candler School. All right. So within Pitts Theology Library, which is within Candler School of Theology, which is not the old Candler Library, we have a ready reference section of United Methodist Church journals. Also, there are a few histories, very few, that have been bound at one point in the history of the library and put on the stacks. So it's possible, unlikely, but possible that you could find one of the church histories located within the main stacks, and you don't have to make an appointment to see that. All right, so here's a few reference books that I use a lot in the special collections. If people contact me and they want information about one of their ancestors, these books list names alphabetically about preachers from the Methodist history. The only thing that's I think is important, and a lot of times I don't pay attention to, is the date. So they have to be within this date. So if there's somebody before, somebody after, the name is not listed. But yeah, we love this Methodist preachers in Georgia, 1783 to 1900, and then I even did a supplement. It just lists the name of the preacher and then where they worked, and if any other information that our friend Harold Lawrence was able to find. History of Methodism in Georgia from 1736 to 1955. This is an excellent index in the back, once again, where you can look up people's names. That can be very helpful. And then Methodism in North Georgia, History of the North Georgia Conference. That's good for getting a general overview of the history, but it doesn't have as many names in that. But I use these reference books all the time. And if it's something someone else is interested in, obviously, if you want to contact me and I'll look through them, I'm happy to do that, but you can also do it yourself if you want. So before I move on, is anyone still looking at this slide? Oh, please go ahead.
You're focusing on the North Georgia Conference and not the whole state.
We have records from the whole state if they voluntarily gave them to us.
There's also a South Georgia Conference.
There is. But sometimes people from the South Georgia Conference still send their stuff to us. So it's possible. But you are correct that the North Georgia Conference, we're the repository only for the North Georgia Conference. So if there's something from North Georgia Conference, it's with us for sure.
Here's the geographical difference.
I don't know exactly. I'm trying to remember if we have anything from Macon, because I would assume it's somewhere around there. But I couldn't tell you off the top of my head. Yeah.
Add that to your presentation.
Taking notes.
You know right where the South Georgia Conference records are.
They're in the museum. I'm trying to remember. It sounds like you might know. Would you like to?
Therefore, by the sea on.
There you go.
House.
Yes. Yeah.
That's the South Georgia.
It does have a better view. I will say that. Yeah. Yeah, go ahead.
Is this all Methodists, or is it just really United Methodists?
It is mostly United Methodist history, I mean, that we have at the Pitts Theology Library, but it's a very complicated, I don't know how familiar you are with Methodist history. But
I know AME is different from United.
it is, yeah. Yes, it is, correct. So we do have some records from those, but certainly not as many because there was not as much of an effort made by an organization such as the UMC to pull these records and give them to a repository. So it is worth looking, but I can't guarantee it. Yeah. I'm sorry, did you have a question?
And
Oh, go ahead.
asking about these.
Oh, for these, I believe there are a few records kept from the other because of the time frame, but I can't tell you for sure, for certain. Yeah. Like I said, if you have a name and you send it, I'm happy to look. All right. So this is how to get in contact. This is just the main reference department. And then this is my personal email, main website. This is our listserv email. The phone goes to our reference area. So whoever would be there would answer that. But I will leave it there so anyone can get that if they want it. But I think that concludes it.